Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're watching the world. My name is Sean Driver. This is the Red Horde, and we're talking red cards. We're talking suspensions. We're jumping into the regulations to find out predominantly what's going on with Wimbledon. Harry Pell suspended. Their coach is suspended. They're out a number of other players, but specifically, we're going to be looking at sending offs and the automatic suspensions that come with it. Getting into the regulations. Let's jump into it. Welcome to the Red Horde. So you don't know this, but I've already recorded this once before, and it ended up being so convoluted and so esoteric that I couldn't make sense of what I was saying. So I've redone the whole thing. So we're talking suspensions. Harry Pell picks up 2 yellow cards in AFC Wimbledon's match against Ipswich Town back on January 6th. That was a FA Cup match. And he got one in the 26th minute. He got another one in the 55th minute. Because he got his 2 yellow cards, you get a red card. Boom, you're sent off. And then you get an automatic suspension for picking up your red card. It's just one game. We'll go through the particulars of what it means based on the different red cards that you can get. But the question that was asked was, does that mean that he's suspended for the Wrexham game? And even though they had a match against Oxford United on Tuesday, and the answer is yes. I'm giving you that answer right now. If you want to end with that, you can. That's the conclusion. But I will go through the entire regulations, and I hope you stay with it. If you haven't been here before, we do watch parties. We do them for every match, men's and women's. I slide in for those ones and try to get on for every single one anyway. So they're there. We also jump on for videos like this where we talk regulations, finances, accounting, all of that sort of fun topics. I do the Who Are You series, which I just finished up, which went through and talked about every team in the league for those that are unfamiliar, including myself, and getting to know who it is that Wrexham's going to be playing. Hopefully we get to do that again next year for League One competitions. But if you like that sort of stuff, check out the other videos, follow along, hit the subscribe button. That's what we do. But jumping into this one, I've given you the answer already. The answer is yes, but let's talk about the rest of things. It is interesting involving Harry Pell, because if you go back, and I'll put the description down in the link down in the description, Harry Pell was involved in a tackle on Elliot Lee in the first match that Wrexham and Wimbledon had. He took him out just outside of the box. Probably should have been a red card. I think serious foul play applies. He didn't get a card. And so I'll put that link down below. 73rd minute, 52nd. You can go and watch that. So that's a player who probably deserved to end up getting red. Well, he's not going to be playing against us because he's picked up a suspension in advance of that. Talking about AFC Wimbledon, just before we jump into things, here's the tweet that says, brilliant, injuries, internationals, recalls, and suspensions. They're missing a whole host of players. Pell, Pierce, Lewis, Al-Hamadi, Bougiel, probably Neufeld as well. And so I went through that and went, holy cow, that is a lot of people. But are they going to be missing Pell? The answer is yes. He got his 2 yellow cards. So you pick up 2 yellow cards, and what is that in the same match? What does that mean? You get a red, and with that, you get a 1-match suspension. How do we know that? We look at Table 2 of the FA Handbook, and it has the sending off offenses, and you scroll down to the bottom of that chart, and what do you see there? You see receiving a second caution in the same match, automatic suspension, 1 match. What games do those apply to? Well, go to the next column and it says competitions to which that automatic suspension applies. Now, we don't have to worry about the Women's FA Cup for obvious reasons, or the Women's League Cup, obvious reasons, or the FA Trophy, because that's not a competition that is being played amongst the teams that are concerned. But the competitions to which the automatic suspension applies, relevant league games, FA Cup, EFL Cup, not the EFL Trophy. And you can see that further down below in the same column where it says if the sending off occurs in a trophy match, then it has to be served in a trophy match. And also, if the sending off occurs in another first team competitive match other than the EFL Trophy, you can't use an EFL Trophy match to serve that suspension. So for Mr. Pell, you received a red card for multiple cautions in the same game. That's a first team competitive match. That means that you cannot use a trophy match to serve that automatic suspension, and that's why he played against Oxford United on Tuesday, is because that was a trophy match. He couldn't serve his suspension. He played, and he will now serve his suspension in the next non-trophy first team competitive match that followed the Ipswich Town game, and that is us. So there's your quick summary. I'm going to go into the regulations further and talk about some other interesting options and hopefully be able to explain myself better than I did the first time I went through this whole thing. But before we do that, let's talk about the suspensions, the injuries, and all of the madness that's going on with AFC Wimbledon. Wimbledon is out 4 of 11 players that have played over 1,000 minutes. So who are they out? Joe Lewis, he didn't make the Ipswich squad. He's a defender. He's anticipated to be out. Al Hamadi, he is playing in the Asian Cup with Iraq for the national team, has called him on, so he's away. That's 13 goals and 6 assists that went with him, so that's a big loss. Also out, Omar Bougiel, who is with Lebanon in the Asian Cup, so he's away. 4 goals and 2 assists for him, another big loss. Jeff Neufeld is tentative. He didn't make the Ipswich side. He could be back. We're going to see. Alex Pearce, he went out with an injury in the 35th minute. He's not expected to be back. And Harry Pell, as we've just talked about, he's suspended. Add to that whole list of players that are suspended and not going or injured and not or away on international duty. They're without their coach. Johnny Jackson, just on January 9th, ended up getting a 2-match ban that was announced for an incident that occurred in their December 22nd game against Crawley Town. He was... It was abusive of an official. He ended up getting his 2-game suspension. He was also sent off, and he refused to stay in the change room. So he's serving his 2 games. If you want to learn more, I'd suggest going to Google it, but be cautious, because with Wimbledon, they have a managerial suspension history that's pretty significant. I was shocked, impressed, concerned. I mean, I find it fascinating. They also, just as of yesterday, so January 10th, they found out that their former managing director, Danny Macklin, got suspended from all football management and operations until March 25th of this year, and that was for abuse and threatening language towards a female referee. And then if you're going to just put in Wimbledon coach, you have to make sure that you separate out Wally Downs, who was their coach 4 years ago, who got suspended for betting on matches and hasn't, as I understand it, picked up coaching anywhere since. So let's leave that aside. They're missing a ton of players. They're going to be missing their coach. They still will have James Tilley. He's got 7 goals, 4 assists. They're going to have Ryan Johnson and Jack Curry, who are frequent and common place defenders for them. And they have Alex Bass, their keeper. But they are missing a lot of firepower up front, and it's why I will boldly predict that at home against Wimbledon, in a match where we've got 4 people coming back from injury, we've had a whole week off where they played on Tuesday, 4-0. Bold, yeah, but I'm going to call it 4-0. We'll see what happens. Maybe everyone's going to be mad at me now. Jumping into the regulations, because I want to talk about the red card sending off. We did do a video about accumulations when Elliot Lee had 4 yellow cards in 10 games. If you get 5 cards in 19 games, you get a automatic suspension for accumulation. And we said, I said, he's going to get suspended. He didn't. He didn't pick up another yellow card for 9 games. So no automatic suspension for him. Yay for me for putting it out on the universe. And everybody, see, the education went out. Elliot heard me, right? No, nothing. I'm not that important at all. The on-field regulations, section D of the FA Handbook. It is a massive document, 744 pages, and this starts at page 191 of them if you want to follow along. I'll put the link down below. The Category 1, that's Section 1 that talks about the leagues that this involves. That's EFL leagues, that's us, so we're Category 1. Follow along, first team competitive matches defined to mean really all competitions. It does include EFL Trophy competitions in there. You'll see that that's subsequently cut out while we saw it earlier. It's a different competition. Scope of suspension. Section 39, category, a period of suspension applicable to a player association in Category 1 will be ones that come out of Tables 1 and Tables 2. What does that mean? If you get an accumulation, you have to go to Table 1. If you get a suspension for too many yellow card accumulations, you go to Table 1. If you get a suspension for a sending off, you go to Table 2. So let's bring up Table 1 because this is interesting. Just look at the far left and the far right column. This is on 2 pages on a PDF, and I tried to shrink it together. It's probably really tiny. I'll move my head over here so I can expand the camera. On far along the left, it says competition to which the caution's accumulated. Then draw all the way over to the opposite side, and it says competition to which the automatic suspension applies. Why is that relevant? If you pick up the yellow accumulation, too many yellow cards, and you get a suspension for accumulation, if it happened in the Premier League, you serve it in the Premier League. If it happened in the EFL leagues, you serve it in the EFL League. If it happened in the FA Cup and the EFL Trophy and the EFL Cup, that's where you serve it. So you do not sit out on yellow card accumulation suspensions. You do not have to sit out of the other competitions. If you pick it up in the league, you can still play in the cups. If you pick it up in the cup, you can still play in the leagues. I think that makes sense, right? Yellow card accumulations have to serve it in the league in which you, in the competition in which you picked it up. Red cards, not the same. Go to table 2, deals with sending offs, red cards. And you follow along under the far right column, and it says competition to which automatic suspension applies. And it says the league, that's A, FA Cup, that's 2, EFL Cup, that's 3, and then the other ones don't apply. And as we went over the EFL Trophy, if you pick up a suspension in the EFL Trophy, you serve it in the EFL Trophy. If you pick it up in another competition, you cannot serve that suspension in an EFL Trophy match. So you get a sending off offense for any of the offenses that are there: serious foul play, denying an obvious team a goal, spitting, two yellow cards, 2 cautions in the same match. You get your automatic suspension, and you can serve it in another competition. That is, if you pick up the red in an FA Cup, Mr. Pell, then you can have to serve that in the next first team competitive match, and that includes, according to Table 2, League 1 match or League 2 matches. And so that's why you were able to play against Oxford in the EFL Trophy, but you cannot play against Wrexham. He knows this. I'm just saying it as though for a force and effect. Just going to stop here briefly just to have a look at the actual sending off offenses and the automatic suspensions that come with them, because I find this fascinating. Spitting on somebody, that gets you 6 games. Serious offense. The most significant offense that you can commit in English football that gets you an automatic suspension, spitting. Not violent conduct, not serious foul play. You know what? Butcher somebody. Smash him in the head 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times. That's 3 games, 3 matches. You know, subject to maybe an independent regulatory commission coming in and giving you more. But as far as the automatic suspension goes, bash somebody in the head a couple of times. You look at violent conduct and you go down to the IFAB rules that talk about what does violent conduct include. Violent conduct is when a player uses or attempts to use excessive force or brutality when challenging somebody who doesn't have the ball. Or, in addition to that, somebody, when not challenging someone with the ball, deliberately strikes an opponent, a person, a player, in the head or face with the hand or arm. They're guilty of violent conduct unless it was negligible force. So you hit somebody with significant force in the face, 3 games. Spit on them, 6. And the other thing that this sort of suggests to me is body shots. If you're going to swing on somebody, get them in the gut. Because you might have an argument that it's not violent conduct unless it goes to excessive force or brutality. Interesting argument anyway. I'm curious as to how that would go over. Serious foul play, that's the one that's most frequently for challenges on the ball. If it's excessive force or brutality, you clatter into somebody, you use one leg, both legs, excessive force, you put in their safety into jeopardy, you're going to get 3 games. The denying a goal, an obvious goal, it's a 1 match, handball or otherwise. I will say they have softened this and interpreted the handball situation a little bit different. It doesn't go to an automatic red unless it's to stop an obvious goal scoring opportunity, and may not even get a caution depending on the circumstances. There's a whole assessment process for that. That's maybe a different video. I don't know when it comes up, and we're concerned about it. I wanted to jump through the regulations in specific format just to kind of go through it. The sending off offenses, because we did that for the accumulation one, and then we can say we've gone over them here. Section 30, the commission of a sending off offense by a player gets you an automatic suspension. Great. What does that mean? Well, go to table 2 for category 1. We talked about that. That's great. Straightforward so far. Additional sending off offenses. If you end up getting multiple sending off offenses in the same competition, the same season, the same year, you may go before the regulatory commission and end up having to get suspended for extra games because you continue to get red cards over and over and over again. So that's possible. That's sections 32. 34 talks about the EFL Trophy competition and basically says if you've been sent off there, you may get sent off for additional matches. Fine. I get that. Straightforward. Commencement of the suspension, essentially, it's immediate. What I find fascinating and difficult to explain, and this is why I've redone the whole video, is because I sucked at this moment before, and I'm not going to suck now. This is where it's at. Section 38, multiple suspensions arising from a single match. Let's go. Category 1. So this is if you were to end up obtaining a yellow card for some minor offense, and that yellow card triggered the penalty for accumulation. And we know from previously discussing it, if you get an accumulation in, say, a league competition, does that automatic suspension apply to other competitions? What do you say, yes or no? I hope you said no. Remember Table 1, Premier League, accumulation of yellow card suspensions in the Premier League. EFL League, remember that chart back and forth? I hope we have that. So what happens if in that same match you get that yellow card? Now you've got to serve that automatic suspension from accumulation, and then you go and pick up a straight red. Not your second yellow that would get you just your one red, although that would work. But let's say you completely take somebody out from the kneecaps going in on a really bad tackle. You wipe them out. You get your 3-game red card suspension. And what's the period in which you serve them? Section 38 says any period of suspension arising from the sending off offense first, followed by the accumulation of cautions. And I think that makes sense. Why? Because if you picked it up in, say, a league competition and your next match was a cup competition, then you can't put the accumulation first, because somebody could say, well, I can play in that game. Because the accumulations should go first, and the accumulations happen in the league game, I can play in the cup match. And they say, no, serve the red card first because it goes across multiple competitions, and then you can serve your accumulation for cautions later as those games come available. So I think that one makes sense, and I think that explanation actually kind of worked. Let's give myself a pat on the back, because that took me forever to try to get there. And now this is where it doesn't make sense to me. Section 38, we just went over that, and it says, follow this order of precedence. If you get multiple suspensions in a single match, you start with the sending off offense, you go with the accumulation. That makes sense to me, but if you get the multiple automatic suspensions over different games, then they change the order, and I don't quite understand why. Section 43 says, subject to paragraph 38 above, and I don't know why it's subject to, because it appears to me to be unrelated. It says a player shall serve automatic suspensions arising from section 1 in a chronological order of precedence. Here's the example that they give to explain the chronological order of precedence. As a player ends up receiving an automatic suspension for their accumulation of yellow cards, and they get their, in this it's a Premier League example, so it's 15 games. In our competition, it would be 10 cautions and 37 games. In any event, they pick up their suspension due to accumulation of yellow cards in their first game. And they specifically say here it was a Premier League match. Okay. Then they say arising from the club's next first team competition match, which happened to be an FA Challenge Cup match, that player receives an automatic suspension of 3 matches arising from a sending off for violent conduct. Okay, so simplified, they get too many yellows in their Premier League match game. Then they have an FA Challenge Cup, remembering that you're not suspended in an FA Challenge Cup match for accumulation. You serve those accumulation penalties in the league in which they fell in, the Premier League. So then they play in that FA Challenge Cup, and then they pick up a red. So under Section 38, where it happens in the same match, you do the sending off offense first. So serve those 3 red. Here they say no, because you already started with the yellow, and even though the accumulation suspensions, and even though that penalty hadn't started, now you've picked up the red. What do? Well, you serve it in chronological order of precedence. Scroll down to the bottom, and it says players automatic suspension for accumulation was received first, and therefore applies to the 3 Premier League matches. And then the automatic suspension for the sending off would then apply to their Challenge Cups and their EFL Cup matches, because they give us their next 6 games. Premier League, FA Challenge Cup, Premier League, FA Challenge Cup, EFL Cup, Premier League. So they split it up and say, accumulation, that'll automatically assign to the Premier Leagues, and then we're going to take the 3 games for the red card and fit it in the middle, and we'll take care of those. That's very different than what would happen under Section 38. If you received that accumulation suspension and sending off in the same one, the sending off goes first. So that means suspended Premier League, Challenge Cup, Premier League. That knocks those 3 off. Then you serve the remaining accumulation of caution suspensions, which means you can play in the Challenge Cup, you can play in the EFL Cup, but then you're suspended for the Premier League and the next 2 subsequent Premier League games that come following that. I don't know why they made it different. And if somebody knows why and has an explanation for me, great. If you think I've got the interpretation wrong, please let me know. But it's something that makes no sense. I want to talk accumulation of cautions, just wrapping things up. If you remember, there was that other video that was out there when Elliot Lee was sitting on 4 yellow cards, thought he was going to end up picking his 5th up prior to his 19th game, and thought he's going to get suspended. He never did. But I wanted to see what the status of the accumulations are. The match to watch now is the 37th game, and that's up to including the 37th game. If you end up picking up 10 yellow cards prior to the end of your 37th game, you get a 2-match ban. If you were suspended prior for the 5 cards in 19, you'll get an extra match on top of that, so it would be a 3-match ban. So where are we sitting on the yellow card accumulation? We really only have 5 players that are in jeopardy. McLean has 7, Mullen has 5, Jones has 5, Lee still on 4 yellow cards, and it's been since forever ago. I think it was his 9th, 10th game that he had 4 cards, so it's been a while. And O'Connell with 4. Doing the math, if you get more than yellow cards in 0.27 of the game, so 27% of your games you get a yellow card, you'll be on pace to get 10 yellows in 37. So the only person who is currently on a trajectory to end up getting too many yellow cards and is ready for a suspension is McLean, and that's because he's at 0.28 yellows per game, and 0.27 is the bar. So hopefully he doesn't pick up 3 more yellows in the next handful of games here, so he can avoid that suspension. But just wanted to go through that process and break that down. Look, I hope that this one made sense, and it makes sense to me from this perspective. AFC Wimbledon's in trouble for the game. No coach, missing 2 players that are away on international duty, including their top scorer. They're missing Pell as a consequence of the suspension because he picked up a red card and couldn't serve that in the EFL Trophy. That's easy to explain. Somebody, anybody who's out there who wants to end up diving through section 38 and 43 and explaining those to me, I would welcome it, because it doesn't make any sense. I think those are really poorly written, and I would invite the FA Handbook to go back to their council and ask them to redraft that, because that's a mess. Not a professional opinion, just a personal one. God, maybe it's because it's midnight. Anyway, am I editing this tonight? Am I doing that? We're back for the AFC Wimbledon match watch party. It's going to be there. This has sort of turned into a ranty rave about a whole bunch of other stuff, and we'll see how this comes out in the edit. I'm going to do the cop video because we got good news. The sewer septic condition was approved, and that means that we can go to full capacity. And they've started some septic work, and that is freaking awesome. But there's a lot of conditions that are still there to go through, and I kind of want to do a scorecard and see where it's at. I was hoping to be able to do both of these today, but this video took so damn long because how convoluted is this nonsense? Anyway, Sean Driver, this is Red Horde. Hope you like that one. See ya. Hit subscribe.